Hi, Michael Romick here, and today we're going to be talking about the importance of flexibility training. As I already mentioned, the most important part of working out is what we call flexibility training. And there are a number of things that you want to take into consideration when you're developing a flexibility program. The first thing I want to talk about is that your muscle fibers, in theory, slide over one another. Okay, they're very similar to this piece of elastic. There's a lot of extensibility and flexibility. And imagine that you develop a knot in your muscle. Okay, it's very similar to this. If you start pulling this from both ends, what's going to happen? It's going to get tighter and tighter. What happens is you develop what are called microscopic tears or adhesions. They're very similar to knots. And if you start contracting the muscle, it's very similar to what's happening here. It gets tighter and tighter. And if you apply enough pressure or enough tension, you could literally rip or tear the muscle tissue or the connective tissues that are associated with it. And so that's why it's so important to go through a corrective exercise strategy or a flexibility program. So the first thing we want to talk about is SMFR, and that stands for self-myofascial release, or what we call foam rolling. Now, you can use a foam roller, you can use a lacrosse ball or a stick or an RA. There are a number of different devices you can use to start breaking up the microscopic tears or adhesions in your muscles. But the key is to find these knots in your muscles, and you're going to apply pressure for about 20 to 30 seconds. And what that does is that excites the muscle spindle, and it causes your muscles to relax and get rid of the knots. So that's the first thing that we want you to do. Now, with a good foam rolling program, it's going to take you anywhere between 5 and 10 minutes initially to go through and address some of your problem areas. And we're going to recommend that you get here about 5 minutes early just to make sure that you're rolling out. The second thing we're going to discuss with you is the importance of following a corrective exercise strategy. So we're going to give you a corrective exercise strategy to follow to help you start activating and integrating the right muscle groups. Now, correctives are important because we all have motor dysfunctions, muscle imbalances, or posture deviances that we need to address. And we have developed a formula where we want to make sure you're activating the muscle groups that might be weak, that you're working on increasing your mobility or your range of motion. We want to help stabilize and work on strengthening all the connective and intrinsic muscles, all the connective tissues and intrinsic muscles. And then we want to take you through a dynamic warm-up process where you're able to start activating and integrating all of the right muscle groups. So that is all part of developing a sound corrective exercise strategy for you. And of course, the warm-up is actually designed to help you start overcoming your muscle imbalances or motor dysfunctions. And the whole point of a warm-up is to start increasing blood flow to the muscles to help increase your range of motion. And just as important as the warm-up is the cool-down process. Now, a lot of people think that you should stretch out before you actually warm up or before you actually work out, and that's not true. The most important part of a warm-up is to go through the self-myofascial release. Now, imagine that you have a rubber band, okay, and that rubber band, let's say you put that rubber band in the freezer. If you take that rubber band out of the freezer and you start pulling it, you start stretching it, what's going to happen to the rubber band? It's going to break. And that's what happens if you start stretching your muscles when they're cold. That's why it's really important to take that rubber band and put it in some warm water. If you keep doing that for about 5 to 10 minutes, it's going to warm up the rubber band, so then you can start pulling it and stretching it out. If you don't go through this process, what's going to happen is you're going to potentially injure yourself or open yourself up to a risk or potential risk of injuring yourself. And so that's why with the static stretching, we'll always do it at the end of the workout. Now, if ideally, you would go through and do this first process, the first part of the flexibility program, and then go through a static stretching routine, and then at the end of the workout, you would go through and do the cool down, the static stretching, and then the foam rolling. You can, the first thing you should do is the foam rolling, and the last thing you should do is the foam rolling or the self-myofascial release. So I hope you found this video to be helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to talk to us in the gym or send us an email. Thank you very much.